everybody. Welcome to our event tonight. My name is Chris Kaminsky. I'm the president of the Georgetown Historical Society. And before we get started, I want to point out we have refreshments over here again if you want to grab something before the talk. Also direct your attention to our back table. We have some of our books out. I try to stick with things that are a little bit to do with what we're talking about tonight. I have a couple of our Civil War books. We have Cuffy Doll. We're talking about slaves, civil years before the era. A few local history books. If you're not already a member of the Georgetown Historical Society, I urge you to pick up one of our brochures. There is a membership form inside it. Georgetown Historical Society runs the Brocklebank Museum, and we depend very heavily on the support of our members to keep that place open and running. And it's a great place. If you haven't been there, please come visit us this summer. We're open every Sunday from 2 to 5, so pick up one of those. And this year, we are doing a raffle. We have a very, very generous member who donated a brand new iPad Air. It comes with cell and Wi-Fi capabilities. It's worth something around $700, I think. So we are raffling that off. Tickets are one ticket for $5 or 3 tickets for $10. So we would strongly encourage you to buy some raffle tickets out back after the event. And we are very fortunate within the Historical Society to have some great members who are very into historical research, genealogy. We've got some wonderful historians. And we are very lucky to have one of them join us tonight and give a talk. Faith Johnson is a longtime member of the Historical Society, and she has offered to give a talk on Women of Smoke and Fire. So I introduce Faith Johnson. We have a PA system if needed, so if people can't hear her, let her know and
wait.
Faith
I'm going to try hard to project.
It's a matter of Faith, speak up or
distances up. Don't like that too much. Do you remember the Amistad? Who remembers the Amistad? Good. Oh, good.
Yep.
This is the Amistad. I'll pass it around so you can have a peek. The Amistad was a slave ship, came from Africa, from the Mendi tribe, headed for I think Savannah, went to a port in the Caribbean, and then headed toward our coast. The slaves took over. In spite of being ill, so many had died. The Middle Passage, was horrible. But somehow within them they found that strength, and they took over the ship, and they said to the captain, sail east, sail east. All day the captain sailed east. At night, when the slaves had settled down, the captain sailed west. So they were going east during the day and west in the night. And they came ashore in New Haven. Not what the captain wanted, not what the slaves wanted. They were arrested as runaway slaves. They said, we're not. We've never been sold, we are free men. And a group that had coalesced around a man named Louis Tappan said, this is an outrage. We will not let this happen. And they pulled resources together, found lawyers, and freed them from the New Haven prison. However, the ship owner said, we're taking it to the Supreme Court. And so Louis Tappan and another went to John Quincy Adams and said, we want you. You are the man who could win this case. In his diary, John Quincy Adams writes, what has this come to me? Me with my teeth falling out. Why have I been asked to take this enormous responsibility? But he did, and the slaves were freed. This group around Louis Tappan raised money and paid for their passage back to Africa. A great moment in our history. Of course, things got worse here. And Tappan said, these people and others who gathered around the freedmen from Mendy said, we can't be a part of our foreign board because this is the Congregational Foreign Missions Board that they had been dedicated to.
I assume this is prior to the Civil War or after?
It's prior.
Okay.
Things are building up. Louis Tappan said, well, we can't be a part of them anymore because they won't stop taking money from slave owners. So we have to have our own group. And they formed the American Missionary Association. Other denominations were doing similar things. So in my presentation tonight, forget about the American Medical Association. The AMA is the American Missionary Association, okay? I am going to introduce you this evening to my friends. I have been reading about them, studying about them for probably 10 years. I'm disorganized. I'm working towards something, but I'm not there yet. So I've known these women for a long time. I'm going to read you a wonderful quote that I ran across this summer while I was reading W.E.B. Du Bois's book, The Soul of the Black Man. I thought this is an incredible find. I just happened to find it. Behind the ruins of war, just a second, I lost my place. Behind the ruins waved the calico dresses of women. And after the hoarse mouthings of the field guns rang the rhythm of the alphabet. They were rich, they were poor, they were young and not so young. Some bereaved of a father or a brother or a husband. They came seeking a life work in planting the New England schoolhouses among the slaves in the South. They did their work well. In fact, in the first year, 1862, 10,000 souls were taught the alphabet and onward to reading. The children came and their parents said, we want to learn too. So they taught the children during the day, they taught the adults at night, and went to bed exhausted. Now I am going to take the role of 3 women. My name is Mary Kelsey Peake. I was privileged to be born to a free black woman and an English gentleman. They knew that education was what I needed. They were determined that I would be educated. But it was against the law. In North Carolina, where I was born, in Hampton Beach, I could not be educated. It was against the law. My aunt lived in Alexandria. Fortunately, Alexandria was a part of the District of Columbia, not Virginia. Alexandria was not limited by the laws of Virginia. And so, for 10 years, from the time I was 6 till I was 16, I had the privilege of an education. I loved it. And at 16, I was just full of ideas of what I was going to do and what I was going to study. And suddenly, Alexandria was a part of Virginia, and I could not be educated anymore. I was devastated. I was devastated. I went home. Many nights I could not sleep. And for some reason I was drawn to a cemetery. Not to a beautiful garden. It was not a beautiful garden. But somehow I felt peaceful there. And several nights, all by myself, I walked to that garden and sat, trying to find peace, trying to find direction. One night, it seemed as if Jesus was with me. I felt his presence, and I heard him say, "Mary, teach." And I was a little uppity. I said, "Teach? I can't teach here. It's against the law." "Mary, teach." Well, I walked away. Teach. Okay, I'll find a way. And so I took children into my home. I taught them. I said, "Don't say much about this in the community. This is between you and me. We don't have to talk about it." But I educated a lot of children. And oh, how I loved it. I had a purpose in my life. Once again, I knew what I was called to be, and I was a teacher. But war clouds were gathering. I knew bad times were ahead. My town was near Fortress Monroe, huge Union fort. And just as I was beginning to feel it's coming here, the Confederates burned my town. Before the Confederates came, the plantation owners knew. And they packed up. And of course, they had us black people help. And as my mother's employer climbed into her stagecoach to go, or wagon, to go to the west to safety, she said to my mother, "Mrs. Peak, you are a good prayer. Pray for us. And don't trust those Union people. They say they're doing good. Don't trust them for a minute." The Union soldiers were in the fort, and hundreds of slaves started pouring into the fort. They had barely enough food to feed the soldiers. What were they going to do? Commandant said, "Okay, we're going to call them contraband." That's what they are. They're contraband. And he sent a note to Lincoln and said, "I think that we need to have a status for these people. We're going to call them contraband." Lincoln scratched his head, wrote back, "Good idea." And so Fort Monroe, as well as many other forts, kept the slaves there. They felt they were not bound by the Fugitive Trade Act. They knew if they pushed them out, the Confederates would insist that they help them in their cause. And so they all gathered in Fortress Monroe, and the AMA, the American Missionary Association, said, "So, we've got to have schools." Louis Lockwood came down from New York, and he was a smart man. He just kind of talked to people. "We want to have schools. Who do you know that teaches?" "Mary Peak." "That's me." They heard about me, and they wanted me to teach at Fortress Monroe. Oh, the children that we taught and their parents in the evening, they were so thirsty for knowledge. It was 1861, the war had just begun. And although I was so fired up inside, my body was not good. My little cough became a big cough. And finally, the doctors at Fortress Monroe said, Mary, you have tuberculosis. Oh my. I knew I was going to die. I had a 5-year-old daughter, Daisy. It was a terrible blow. The good women of the American Missionary Association sent me this lovely soft shawl. It's just light and right for North Carolina. And I clung to it. I knew Daisy would be okay. I knew her dad would take good care of her. And my students just came in, took care of me. And I know it will not be long before I'm not with them here at Fort Monroe. But I've had a wonderful life. Oh my, I have had a wonderful life. At 16, I never would have dreamed that I could have taught so many wonderful students. They used to say, the law is there. You can't teach black kids because they can't learn. Oh, they were wrong. And I was a part of teaching that.
I asked a question as we go along this. I was curious, the blacks that entered the fort of the Union Army, did they, were they made soldiers and were they fighting?
For the
as
most
well?
part, they were building, they were a construction crew.
Yeah.
Now, I think, well, it was, of course, late in the war before there were black soldiers, but as soon as it was possible.
But they were assisting folks at the forts probably.
They were the back behind Dane's guys. My name is Esther Douglas. I grew up in Hanover, New Hampshire, and I thought it was pretty dull. I was a little bit difficult. I don't think that my parents were at all unhappy when my sister in Iowa had 2 babies in a row and said, send Esther. I said, oh good, we'll send Esther all right. That's just about what she needs. And so off I went to Iowa. But I couldn't stay forever, and I came back to Hanover. I didn't like that idea at all. And then I heard the American Missionary Association wants teachers. I was teaching my grandchildren in Iowa. I could do that. And so I told my parents I was going to do it. They thought, oh, Esther, you're going to kill us. Oh, Esther, you know what you're going into. You know. They don't want you down there. They don't want you to teach the freedmen. Esther, do you know how hard it's going to be? I know. I'm going. And so I did. On a morning in spring, after I had been there about 6 months, and strangely, I was living with a wonderful family, the Stoddards. Most of our teachers lived in dormitories. Oh my. Teaching and living with the same people every day, that was a strain. I felt very privileged to live in a private home. While we were there, the Stoddards didn't have any visitors. Nobody came near them. But the night that I'm talking about, my roommate Emily and I were awakened at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we heard angry voices, and we smelled something. And we looked out the window, and there were torches and a mob. Heard about that. We had heard about that. We were terrified. Then we heard the front door open. Mr. Stoddard walked out the door. He stood in front of that mob. We could not hear what he was saying. They left. We turned around, and they left. Well, I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I looked over at Emily, and she was sound asleep. Oh, so nerves of steel, this Emily. I can't believe she is sleeping. Soon as the sun came up, I started to walk in Savannah, whispering in the moist air. The lilacs were fragrant. The city was so beautiful. And my mind was going from angry mobs to beautiful parks, lovely flowers. How could this happen? I just couldn't put it together. I just couldn't understand how all this hate could be brewed in this beautiful, beautiful place. I kept reminding myself of what had been said in my training before we left. Remember, when you go into these cities, you are challenging their life. You are challenging their way of living. They will be angry. You need to understand where they're coming from. I tried. The school went well. The children enjoyed their learning. And we sent home papers with them every day, and they would share it with their parents. And sometimes they left them around. And some of the white people began to read our papers. Oh, that's interesting. Well, one day life was going to change for me. Mr. Lockwood arrived at our door from the American Missionary Association and said, "Emily and Esther, we've heard wonderful things about you, and we have a new challenge. We want you to go to Daufuskie Island, one of the barrier islands, and we want you to teach these people who have been totally left. Their owners have gone west for safety, and they're there by themselves. They did work, but they didn't do the planning of how to run a plantation. They needed help. And so Emily and I looked at each other and we said, "Look up." And Mr. Lockwood said, "Do you canoe?" And I said, "Oh yes, I used to love canoeing on the Connecticut in Hanover. I loved my Sunday afternoons on the Connecticut River." "Sure, I can canoe," Emily said. "I guess so." And so we said our farewells to the Stoddards, and an amazing thing happened. Some members of that mob came and said, "We thought you were here to do evil, but you did good. Thank you." Well, amazement. We packed our canoe. We started down the river. Emily looked at me. "Esther, this is not like canoeing on the Connecticut, is it?" No. The perspiration was just dripping down my face. And I reached into my bag and I pulled out the lovely silk scarf my mother had given me when she was trying to make me a lady. I didn't like that idea, but whenever I had it on, I thought of her and remembered how she loved me. So I put it on, let the sweat drip into it, and continued paddle. We thought we'd never, but we did, and what a welcoming we had. Oh, they were so happy to see us. They had cleaned out an old barn. They took us to an area where they had set out a dinner of oysters and clams and their best, though they were hungry. Though there was not enough food, but for us, they did an amazing job. With no trouble getting to sleep that night. We just couldn't wait to get to sleep. The next night, after a bit of a discouraging day, the kids wanted to have school the next day. We were exhausted, but we tried. But oh my, sitting for several hours was not in their skill set. So we stayed up and we talked And we decided, well, of course not. They've been running around the island, swimming in the ocean. Of course they can't sit for 3 hours. And so we felt good about revising our curriculum, so there was plenty of time for exercise, and we're all ready for tomorrow. And we walked through the little pathways that just covered with trees in the dusk, and this is a mysterious place. This is a really mysterious place. The next day went better. The kids had their exercise. The kids were happy to learn. And that night we went to bed, not as exhausted, but tired. And in the middle of the night, Emily started screaming, "We're not alone here, Esther, we're not alone, we're not alone." I pulled myself out of sleep and, what is she saying? And then I felt something on my arm, and scorpions. Oh, the place was filled with scorpions. Ooh. Well, we had no idea what to do with scorpions, so we danced around, made as much noise as we could, and I guess we scared them a little, and they just, at least enough so that we could sleep. And we thought, oh, tomorrow the people will tell us how to get rid of scorpions. This too will pass. We'll be fine. It did. And we went back to our teaching, and we became very happy on Defusky Island. But after several months, Emily again woke in the middle of the night. She said, "Esther, I don't feel well." And I touched her. Oh, she was burning. She was burning up. She was sick. And I was quite sure it was malaria. I kept putting cold cloths on her, trying to keep the temperature down. In the morning, I went to some of the people and said, "Don't come near us, stay away." And they said, "We will help, what can we do?" And they decided to have 2 or 3 children within calling distance while all of the adults were out in the field. When you need something, tell the children, they will get us, and we will help. The care was just superb considering the resources, but Emily was not getting better. And I finally said, "Emily, I've got to take you back to Savannah. You have to go back to Savannah." And so back into the canoe, we climbed some rags so that I could keep cooling her with the water of the Savannah River that wasn't too cool. And somehow I got her back to Savannah. When we arrived, a doctor saw Emily. "You've got to go home to recover. This is going to take a long time, Emily. You're not going to go back to Defusky Island soon." And he looked at me and said, "It's not a good idea for you to go back." But I did. I went back, thank heavens it was downstream, because I was so tired. And when I got there, the people came to meet me. I said, "Don't come near. Don't come near. I'm sick. I don't feel well." I knew I had it. I was scared. I was really scared. For a couple of days, I struggled. Maybe it isn't as bad as Emily's was. And at a point of desperation, I heard a canoe approaching. Louis Lockwood was in the canoe. My friends in Savannah had said, "Esther's gone back and we're sure she has pneumonia." And so he followed, and he took me home back. And then they sent me back to Hanover. And I thought, oh my word, will I ever return? Esther did not return to Defusky Island, but she returned to her teaching. North Carolina, for 30 years, she taught, cajoled, and loved the children that she taught. One night, one of the parents of this child was very, very ill. She was quite sure that without a doctor, she would not live for the night. So in total darkness and of course on unlighted roads, she walked 9 miles and found a doctor and took him back where he helped her friend. Esther Douglas taught for 30 years, and she only stopped because she was going blind. My name is Mary Elizabeth Phillips, and I am a college graduate. Now you might think that's a little bit snooty to be so proud of being a college graduate, but this was 1874. How many women graduated from college? My mom and dad made huge sacrifices so that I could go to college, and I will pay them back for their gift with my life. I taught in local schools for several years, enjoyed it, and then I found that itchy feeling, I've got to learn more. I can't keep teaching without learning more. And a friend of mine said, there is a wonderful place in New York, Western New York State College, Chautauqua. It is a place where people go to worship, to hear lectures, and to meet people from all over the world, and I think we should go. I didn't need any convincing. Oh no, I was going to Chautauqua, and I didn't eat much that year. I kept putting my pennies into my savings, and I was ready to go. It's better than I ever imagined. Oh, the people I met, the music that I heard, like the music I'd heard in Philadelphia once. And I heard Shakespeare in a theater, not out of a book. I loved every minute of it. And then one day this man named Louis Lockwood came up to me and said, Mary Phillips, I think you would make a wonderful teacher at Talladega College in Alabama. College? You think I could teach college? Oh yes, Mary Phillips, you could do that. But Mary, don't answer me now. I know you can't answer me now. Don't even try. You'll know. At some point you'll know if this is what you want to do. So I went down to the lake, and somehow it was too bright, it was too vivid, I needed quiet. And I walked into the woods and walked and walked. And somehow, right from the center of me, my courage came up. I said, I can do that. And I told Louis Lockwood, yes, I will go to Talladega, Alabama, and I will teach. The hardest thing was telling my parents. They looked at me and they were so upset that I said, it's going to take you a little while. I'm going up to my room, and in the morning, we'll talk about it. When I came down, they said to me, Mary, you know we love the Union. You know your father fought. You know your uncle died. We love the Union. And as we thought about it last night, we said, there's not going to be a union if those freed men are not taught. There will not be a union. Mary, go. It is your gift to your family. You go. And so I did. And oh my, how I loved those students. They had been educated in our AMA schools, and they were ready. They were ready for college. Their minds were bright. They were so in love with education. The staff were welcoming and honest. They didn't tell me anything that wasn't true. And they told me a few things that perhaps I didn't want to know. But the people of Talladega were not very happy with us, and we had to be very careful in the way that we interacted. But I loved teaching, and I there for 4 or 5 years. And then one day, I saw Mr. Lockwood approaching. He'd been there a month ago. He doesn't visit that often. I said, something's on his mind. And he called me and said, Mary, let's find a quiet place and let's have some conversation. And he said, Mary, I know you love it here. And I know they love you here. But there's a school in Marion, Alabama, in the county of Perry. It's basically falling apart. And I think you could put it back together again. He didn't mince any words. There had been a fire. They were meeting in a parsonage. And he said, frankly, Mary, I don't know if the AMA can support you. We are at a point where we know we've started too much, and Northerners are getting sick of us. They think the war's over. They think the slaves are free. They don't want to give like they did. So I have to tell you, I don't know how much we're going to be able to support you. Well, as they traveled from Talladega to Marion, Mary looked around and said, farms were not thriving. Too many people, too little food. Depression was setting in, and then anger. The freedmen were saying, is this what freedom is? Is this what it's all about? I knew it was hard. Hard, hard, hard. But when I got to the Lincoln School, I met the parents. Mr. Lockwood had told me, when you meet those parents, you will know why I have faith that somehow this school will survive. They treated me royally. I loved them from the minute I met them. And as I went back to my office and thought about it, I said, fundraising, that's all it will save the school. We've got to raise funds. And so I went to the parents. They were very quiet. And then one man said, I pledge $50. And another, like $25. And that moment they raised $1,000 in Marion, Alabama. And then the kids heard about it. And they said, we're going to give part of our cotton picking wages this summer. And they pledged $100. Step by step, the money was raised, the building was built. Guess what? Their reputation grew. More and more students wanted to come to the Lincoln School. More fundraising, more building. And in their third attempt, they had a building was done except for the front brickwork. And they were out. They had no more cash. They called the AMA. They said, we have no more cash. Well, Mary went to her room that night and didn't sleep much. She got up in the morning and said to her staff, I'm leaving for a while. I'm not quite sure how long. I'm leaving. And she went away. And she was gone for quite a while. And some of her most supportive staff were saying, she's not coming back. She knows she can't save the school. She's not coming back. One night she arrived back at the school. Faculty surrounded her and she said, I'm tired. I'm going to bed, but we're going to meet in the courtyard in the morning and I'll tell you my plan. And so when they met her in the courtyard, she had her tool belt on. She had her trowel in hand. She said, folks, I've learned to be a bricklayer. There's no reason that we faculty and our older students cannot put the brick on that building. And she said, you remember what the theme of our school is. Good enough is not good enough here. And so they put the front on the building. And if you were to visit the Lincoln School in the years after, and it looked at the front of the building, you would have had to look very closely to see that that was the work of amateurs. So now you know my friends, Mary, Elizabeth, Mary, Esther, and two Marys. There were hundreds of these women. How many here have ever heard of them? Put your hand up if you've heard of them. Does that bother you a little? That bothers me. It's just outrageous that these strong, talented, dedicated women are not known. In Hampton, Virginia, there is a memorial to Esther Peak. I'm sorry, to Mary Peak. And there is a grand old oak tree. When it was too warm for teaching in Brown Cottage, where she taught most of the time, she took her students out to the live oak and taught them under the tree. When she had died before the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, but when it came to Hampton, they read it under the live oak. And now the National Geographic has designated it one of the 10 most important trees in the world. So Mary is remembered. There is an auditorium in Marion, Alabama that was built in honor of Mary Phillips. Esther Douglas, no, and hundreds others, no, they are not remembered. In closing tonight, I am going to give you little pieces of paper, and I am going to ask you to read these names, symbolic of the hundreds of those who went south. Some of them have a little bit of blurb about who they are. Some of them do not. I don't have enough to go around. There are more people here than I expected. Thank you very much. I'm sorry it's on blue paper. I hope you don't have trouble reading.
You know, Faith, that
All right, starting here, would you read what's on your paper? To the group.
loud and clear.
Sarah Stansky, a lady of color with high intellectual ability.
Thank you.
Clara Dumphead worked herself through Oberlin doing housework.
She was an orphan and worked her way through Oberlin College.
Mary Watson, God wants me to work with these people who have so long trodden under
Nellie Ramsey of Ohio became a pacificator in Amity City, Louisiana, where blacks and whites were prepared to fight to the death. Both blacks and whites responded to her integrity, fairness, and courage, and love of order.
She's one that I want to research. She's extremely interesting.
George C. Booth, Connecticut Normal School. More than I desire my own life, I desire to elevate my own people.
Well, this is what we've heard before, but Louis Topham, leader in the Alma Stove event, influential influential member of the board of the AMA.
Saying that we appreciated white teachers and thought black teachers had something special to share.
I've got Mary Watson, and I think the gentleman over here is Mary Watson. Mary Watson, Rhode Island Normal School, taught in Darlington, Maryland, emphasized citizenship.
Nathan T. Condell said he could have no peace if he stayed at home.
Go. Okay, Thomas Carday, the principal of the Avery School in Charleston, South Carolina.
I was in Charleston this winter and visited the Avery School, and is now a part of the University of Charleston. And it is there for research, it is there for students to remember the heritage. It's still a very alive place.
This is about Barnabas Root, son of African chief taught Hebrew at Talladega, is that?
Talladega.
Hebrew.
One of the things, of course, you never do anything good without being criticized. And one of the things that that the AMA was criticized for was teaching a classical curriculum. And you may remember that W.E.B. Du Bois and George Washington Carver were very split on that issue. Du Bois said, we've got to have leaders, and we've got to have a classical education. And Booker T. Washington was saying, they got to find jobs. Does that sound familiar? And so there was this stress and strain. So Hebrew was taught, and it did train ministers as well as doctors and lawyers.
It just sounds funny in this day and age.
It sure does.
It's much like teaching Latin.
That's right.
You know.
That's right.
Thomas Celery Tucker taught in the Mendel or the
Mendy.
Mendy? In the Mendy mission in Africa.
You see, they were diverse. Men are represented in this reading. There were many, many women. Some men, but most of the men were fighting. They were at war. And there were blacks and whites. It was mostly white, but there were many black teachers that gave a great deal of their lives to this effort. What is their legacy? Well, there are many legacies. Certainly the Avery School in Charleston, South Carolina is one of those legacies. I had a friend whose daughter went to the University of Charleston, College of Charleston, 1 year, and she left. She said the prejudice was so deep that she just couldn't stand it. And I hope that Avery, being integrated now with the college, is beginning to change that. The AMA started all of these schools and colleges, and these are the colleges that have survived. Dillard University in New Orleans, Clarkson Tillotson in Austin, Texas, Lemoyne-Owen in Memphis, Tennessee, Talladega, which we have heard of, Tougaloo in Tougaloo, Mississippi, Fisk, you probably heard of Fisk in Nashville, Tennessee, and the Hampton Institute in Hampton, Virginia. While I was working, I worked with the United Church of Christ, the inheritor of the AMA, and one day there was a big stir, and Fisk University had a dorm closed by the fire department because the sprinkler systems were not working, and school had just begun. They had no money, and we were able to find some money to get the sprinkler system going and help them to overcome that. Unfortunately, we can't do that much anymore. Where are the black colleges now? It is iffy. So many of the young people are going to integrated colleges and want to be there. But there are a significant number that need that closeness of being with black people for a little longer. before perhaps they go on to graduate school. In the early 40s, in the early 40s, there was a study done by the NAACP of people, black people that had PhDs. And they looked at the list and they said, all these people from Perry County, Alabama, what happened there? They graduated from Mary Phillips School and went on to get PhDs. It was remarkable showing.
Do they have federal or state funding to assist them, or they go out and fundraise themselves? Or how do
They do
survive?
fundraising, they have some assistance from the state. Actually, there was a normal school at the Lincoln School, and that, before Mary Phillips arrived, went to Birmingham, and they trained teachers there. And that actually is the beginning of Alabama State University. The Phillips School had gradually had public school funding, but when Alabama totally took the school over, they fired all the white teachers. It had always been integrated, but when the state took it over, they fired the white teachers, had no more white kids, and it was a segregated school. And at that point, the American Missionary Association withdrew.
Is the AMA still in existence?
Only kind of. There is funding that is in perpetuity kind of thing. And the national offices of the United Church of Christ do work that is in the guidelines of the AMA. And that is how it goes on. I worked with the division of the American Missionary Association. Now there is not a name, but funding is, some of the funding is there.
How did you connect the story about the Amistad to this?
It was that movement of people who were saying slavery is wrong. Wherever it exists, it's wrong. And the first thing that kind of gathered them together was the Amistad. And then they said, there's much more work to do.
I'll just share something. I lived in Farmington, Connecticut for many years, and those people that the slaves shipped were scattered to live with families until the
Right, went back to India.
Yeah, and so some of them lived in Farmington, and one of them drowned in the Farmington River, and they think it was actually suicide. He missed Africa so much.
What year was the amnesty?
I knew I was going to be asked that. Numbers don't stick in my head, but I say in the 1840s.
Because during the Revolution, the British would give slaves freedom and liberty if they would fight. And then they sent them up to Nova Scotia and abandoned them all. Basically,
They were way ahead of us. Of course, there were bloody revolutions in the Caribbean islands where the English were in charge, and they were in charge. But in England, they went on this movement compared to us. Anything else? Thank you for letting me introduce you.